The diplomatic shuttle dove descended through the upper atmosphere of Virlan, its hull vibrating with a hum that Noah Reyes felt in the hollow of his chest. He sat alone in the passenger cabin, a space designed for luxury but feeling more like a containment unit for a man who had spent the last 10 years trying to forget the sound of atmospheric re-entry. Noah pressed his forehead against the cool, reinforced transparency of the viewport. Below him, the capital city of the Sarathi Empire did not look like a city at all. It looked like a biological event. From orbit, it had appeared as a neon crown, a ring of light encircling the planet's northern pole. Now, as the shuttle broke through the cloud layer, the scale of it assaulted his senses. Towers of crystalline growth spiraled upward, piercing the lavender sky like spears made of diamond and amethyst. These were not buildings constructed of steel and concrete. They were grown, sung into existence by Sarathi bioengineers over centuries. They shifted color as he watched, rippling from deep indigo to a soft, bruising violet, behaving less like architecture and more like a living aurora frozen in solid form. Noah pulled back from the window and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The reflection staring back at him was tired. At 35, he had the eyes of a man twice his age, dark and heavy with the weight of things seen and unable to be unseen. A thin, pale scar ran from his left temple down to his jawline, a souvenir from the siege of Sector 4, the very battle that had made him famous. The battle that had killed his entire platoon and left him the sole survivor, the so-called hero of the rift. The irony tasted like copper in his mouth. The United Earth Coalition had chosen him as the face of this reconciliation mission precisely because he had killed so many Sarathi. To the politicians back on Earth, it was a poetic narrative, the soldier who laid down his rifle to extend a hand. To Noah, it felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a suit made of raw meat. The shuttle pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "We are on final approach to the Imperial Spire. Touchdown in 2 minutes. Please secure your restraints." Noah tightened the strap across his chest. He adjusted the collar of his dress uniform, which felt stifling compared to the combat armor he used to live in. Outside, the cityscape rushed by. He saw sky bridges humming with anti-gravity traffic, streams of silver vehicles flowing like mercury between the spires. Above the traffic, bioengineered fauna drifted through the air. They resembled massive, translucent manta rays, their trailing tendrils glowing with soft bioluminescence, moving with the slow, inevitable grace of comets. The palace loomed ahead. It was an organic megastructure growing directly out of the planet's mantle, a massive flower of white stone and pulsating veins that dwarfed the skyscrapers surrounding it. It did not look built. It looked birthed. A faint, rhythmic thrum resonated through the shuttle's hull as they neared it. The palace was alive. It had a heartbeat. The shuttle settled onto a landing pad that felt more like a petal than a slab of tarmac. The engines whined down, dying into silence. Noah took a breath, held it for 4 seconds, and released it. It was an old sniper's trick to lower the heart rate. He stood up, grabbed his cap, and walked toward the airlock where the rest of the Earth delegation waited. Ambassador Sterling, a man whose smile seemed permanently etched onto a face made of Teflon, gave Noah a curt nod. "Try to look less like you are scanning for sniper nests." "Lieutenant," Sterling murmured, "we are here to shake hands, not break necks." "I will try," Noah said, his voice gravelly. "But old habits die hard." "Ambassador." The airlock cycled open, hissing as the pressure equalized. The air that rushed in smelled of ozone, crushed flowers, and something electric, like the scent of a thunderstorm just before the lightning strikes. They descended the ramp onto the platform. A double line of Sarathi royal guards waited for them. They were 7 feet tall, humanoid but unmistakably alien, with skin the color of polished obsidian and limbs that were too long, too graceful. Their armor shimmered, shifting opacity as they moved, appearing liquid one moment and diamond-hard the next. They held energy pikes that hummed with a low, menacing frequency. At the end of the honor guard stood a figure that commanded the air around her. First Princess Lysara. She was taller than the guards, her presence radiating a terrifying kind of power. She wore robes of woven light that drifted around her body as if caught in a localized breeze. Her skin was a pale, iridescent blue, marked with bioluminescent patterns that traced the sharp angles of her cheekbones and spiraled down her neck. These markings glowed with a rhythmic intensity, forming a natural crown upon her face. Her eyes were solid pools of gold, lacking pupils, cool and assessing as they swept over the human delegation. Ambassador Sterling stepped forward, bowing low. "Your Highness," he said, his voice dripping with practiced reverence. "It is the honor of a lifetime to stand upon the sacred soil of Virlan." Lysara did not bow. She merely tilted her head, a microscopic gesture that acknowledged his existence without validating it. "You stand where the roots of the world drink deep, human," Lysara said. Her voice was melodic but resonated in the chest, carrying a subsonic weight. "We shall see if your presence nourishes the soil or poisons it." Noah felt the hair on his arm stand up. This was not a welcome, it was a warning. As the formalities dragged on, Noah's gaze drifted. Standing slightly behind Lysara and to the left was another Sarathi. She was younger, shorter than the first princess, though still towering over Noah. Her features were softer, less severe, but she possessed the same luminous golden eyes. Unlike her mother's flowing robes of light, she wore a fitted ceremonial armor made of white chitin and gold filigree. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her hand resting restlessly on the pommel of a sidearm. She looked bored. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. This was Kalia, the second princess. Noah watched her, fascinated by the contrast. Lysara was a statue of ice and authority. Kalia was kinetic energy barely contained. She caught him staring. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a second, Noah felt a jolt of recognition, not of status, but of spirit. She had the eyes of someone who knew what it was like to be trapped in a uniform. The ceremony moved indoors, into the great hall of the palace. The architecture here was dizzying. The walls were translucent membranes that showed the slow circulation of glowing fluids within the palace's structure. It was like walking inside a giant, living lung. During a brief lull in the protocol, while Ambassador Sterling argued politely with a court scribe about seating arrangements, Noah found himself separated from the main group near a massive, glowing pillar. He turned to check his perimeter, a reflex he could not kill, and nearly collided with the white-armored princess. Kalia stood there, arms crossed, studying him with unabashed curiosity. Up close, she smelled of rain and charged static. "You are the soldier," she said. It was not a question. Her grasp of English was flawless, though her accent layered the vowels with a musical harmonic. "I was," Noah replied, stepping back to give her space. "I am just an advisor now, Your Highness." She tilted her head, mimicking her mother's gesture but without the crushing weight of judgment. She looked him up and down, her gaze pausing on the scar on his jaw, then moving to his hands. "I have read the physiology reports on your species," she said abruptly. "Is it true your skeletal structure is internal, that you have no carapace, no exoskeletal density to absorb impact?" Noah blinked, taken aback by the bluntness of the question. It is true. We are soft on the outside. Kalia frowned, a look of genuine confusion crossing her face. That seems like a terrible evolutionary oversight. How do you survive anything? If I were to strike you in the chest, would you simply fold? Noah couldn't help it. A small, dry laugh escaped his throat. Probably, he admitted. That is why we try to avoid being struck. Kalia's lips twitched. A smile. It transformed her face, breaking the regal mask and revealing the young woman beneath. It is a bold strategy, she said. I suppose it explains why you humans build such thick ships. You are compensating for your own squishiness. My entourage calls it tactical armor. Your Highness, Noah said, feeling a smile tug at his own mouth. But squishiness is probably more accurate. Their entourages descended upon them before the conversation could continue. A Sarathi handler looked horrified that the princess was speaking to a human without a script, and a frantic aide from Earth pulled Noah back toward the ambassador. As they separated, Kalia cast one last glance over her shoulder, her eyes bright with amusement. For the first time since leaving Earth, Noah felt the knot of dread in his stomach loosen. The grand welcoming banquet was held in a chamber that defied description. The ceiling vanished into darkness, lit only by floating orbs of biolight that drifted like fireflies. The tables were carved from single pieces of crystal, arranged in concentric circles around a central dais where Lysara sat like a deity on a throne of woven roots. Despite the beauty, the air was thick with tension. Noah sat at the edge of the human delegation's table, picking at a dish that looked like glazed geometric shapes. He watched the room. He saw the way the Sarathi counselors whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward the humans with veiled contempt. He saw the way Ambassador Sterling's smile had become brittle, his voice a little too loud as he pressed Lysara on trade concessions. We believe that a mutual disarmament treaty is the natural next step, Sterling was saying, gesturing with a fork. It would signal trust. Trust is earned. Ambassador, not legislated, Lysara replied, her voice cool enough to freeze the wine in the glasses. And your fleet remains parked just outside our sensor perimeter. That is a strange way to signal disarmament. Noah stopped listening to the politics. His eyes found Kalia again. She was seated at her mother's right hand, looking miserable. She pushed food around her plate, her posture stiff, every few minutes. She would glance toward the human table, her gaze flickering over Noah. It wasn't the look of a predator sizing up prey. It was the look of someone searching for an anchor in a storm. Noah felt a strange pull, an instinct to walk over and make a joke about the food just to see her smile again. He pushed the thought away. He was a soldier, not a suitor. Then the lights flickered. It wasn't a malfunction. The biological luminescence of the palace didn't glitch. It reacted. The walls dimmed, pulsating rapidly, signaling pain. Noah's head snapped up. His hand went instinctively to his hip, grasping for a sidearm that wasn't there. The explosion tore through the silence before the sound even registered. The main blast doors at the far end of the hall shattered inward. Shards of glowing crystal, sharp as razor blades, rained down on the dignitaries. The concussion wave flipped the heavy crystal tables like poker chips. Screams erupted, human and alien voices melding in a chorus of panic. Insurgents poured through the breach. They were Sarathi, but dressed in dark, ragged armor, their faces obscured by jagged masks. They carried plasma rifles that spat bolts of green fire into the crowd. "Secure the princess," a guard roared, but he was cut down a second later. Noah didn't think. He didn't analyze the politics or the rules of engagement. He saw the line of fire. He saw the insurgents raising their weapons toward the dais. He saw Kalia standing frozen, her eyes wide, momentarily stunned by the chaos. He moved. Noah vaulted over the overturned table, sprinting across the open floor. The air hissed as plasma bolts burned ozone trails past his ears. He hit the dais just as a cluster of crystal shards dislodged from the ceiling directly above the princess. "Get down!" Noah shouted. He slammed into Kalia, wrapping his arms around her and driving her to the floor. His momentum carried them both off the raised platform and into the shadows of a side corridor just as the crystal shards smashed into the spot where she had been standing, shattering with the force of grenades. They tumbled across the smooth floor, a tangle of limbs and white armor. Noah took the brunt of the impact, his shoulder slamming into the wall. He groaned, the breath knocked out of him, but he didn't let go. He kept her shielded, his body curled over hers, making himself the barrier between her and the death raining down in the hall. He looked down. Kalia was dazed, blinking rapidly. A jagged splinter of crystal had grazed her arm, slicing through the gap in her armor. Her blood was not red, it was a luminous electric blue. It pulsed from the wound, glowing brightly in the dim corridor. "Kalia," Noah gasped, his voice ragged. "Kalia, look at me." She stared up at him, her golden eyes unfocused, swimming with shock. The noise of the battle was deafening just feet away, explosions. The hum of energy weapons, the shouts of the dying. But in the narrow corridor, the world seemed to narrow down to the two of them. She grabbed his lapels, her grip surprisingly strong. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why did you?" "Stay with me," Noah said urgently. He saw her eyes rolling back, the shock setting in. He panicked. He needed to anchor her. He needed to keep her conscious. Without thinking, he did what he had done for a dying comrade in the mud of Sector 4 years ago. A human gesture. A frantic, desperate attempt to transfer strength through touch. He brought his face close to hers and pressed his forehead firmly against her forehead, skin to skin, mind to mind. "I swear I will not let you die." Noah grated out, the words vibrating between them. "I have got you. You are safe." The moment their foreheads touched, the world vanished. It wasn't just a touch. It was a collision. Noah felt a sudden, violent lurch in his gut, as if the floor had dropped out from under him. A roar filled his ears, not of the battle, but of rushing water, of wind, of 1,000 voices speaking at once, and then silence. But it wasn't silent. He could hear a heartbeat that wasn't his own. It was frantic, fluttering like a trapped bird. He could taste copper and ozone, her fear. He could feel the stinging burn on her arm as if the cut were on his own skin. For Kalia, the sensation was a supernova. She felt the human's mind crash into hers. It was hot, rough, and overwhelmingly protective. She felt his terror, but beneath it, she felt a resolve harder than diamond. She felt his promise, "I will not let you die," not as words, but as a binding law of physics. It wrapped around her soul, heavy and absolute. The ancient pathways in her Sarathi biology, dormant for generations, slammed open. The soul vow, the resonance, the connection flooded her nervous system. She gasped, her back arching off the floor, her vision turned white, then cleared with a terrifying sharpness. She saw Noah not as a stranger, not as an alien, but as the other half of herself. The void in her chest that she hadn't known existed was suddenly, violently filled. She lay there, panting, the blue blood on her arm glowing brighter, syncing with the rhythm of Noah's heart. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, seeing him for the first time. "Husband?" she whispered. The word felt clumsy in English, but the concept behind it, Kalve, the soul-bound, rang through her mind like a bell. Noah pulled back, blinking, shaking his head to clear the sudden dizziness. What? Before he could process what she had said, the corridor was flooded with light. Royal guards stormed in, weapons raised. Their armor flared to full combat opacity. They saw the human on top of the princess, his hands on her shoulders, her blood on his uniform. "Get off her!" a guard roared, leveling his pike. Noah raised his hands, backing away slowly. "I was protecting her. She is hurt. She needs a medic." Kalia scrambled to her feet. She stumbled, dizzy from the blood loss and the overwhelming sensory input of the bond. She reached out, her hand grasping for Noah's arm as the guards seized him. "No!" Kalia shouted. The command voice of royalty cut through her pain. She grabbed Noah's hand, interlacing her fingers with his. The contact sent another jolt of electricity through them both, visible to everyone as a spark of blue energy. "My husband is under attack," Kalia screamed, her voice cracking with a fierce, possessive panic. "Stand down!" The silence that fell over the ruined banquet hall was heavier than the explosion had been. The fighting had ceased as the insurgents fled or were cut down. The smoke was clearing. Dozens of counselors, the Earth delegation, and the royal guard stood frozen, staring at the second princess clinging to the human soldier's hand. Then, the air temperature dropped 10 degrees. First Princess Lysara stepped through the smoke. She was terrifying. Her bioluminescence was flaring so bright it was painful to look at, turning her into a silhouette of pure, radiant fury. The air around her crackled with bioelectric energy, arcing from her fingertips to the floor, scorching the crystal. She looked at Kalia. She looked at their joined hands. She looked at the blue blood smearing Noah's uniform. "Why does my daughter call you husband? Human." Lysara's voice was not a question. It was a geological event. It shook the dust from the ceiling. It vibrated in Noah's teeth. Noah looked at Lysara, then down at Kalia, who was looking at him with an expression of terrified adoration. He looked at his own hand, still gripping hers. Noah started, his voice failing him. "I do not know." "Seize him!" Lysara roared, pointing a finger that crackled with lightning. The guards surged forward and they ripped Noah away from Kalia. The separation was physical pain, a tearing sensation in his chest that made him gasp. "No!" Kalia shrieked, fighting the guards who held her back. She thrashed, her eyes wild. "Do not touch him! Take him to the deep cells!" Lysara ordered, her voice cold as the void between stars. "Lock him in the suppression field. Keep him alive, but only just." She turned her golden gaze on Noah as he was dragged away, struggling against the iron grip of the guards. "I will hold you there, human," Lysara hissed, "until we unravel what spell you have cast upon my blood. And if I find you have corrupted her, you will pray for the mercy of a simple execution." The last thing Noah saw before the blast doors slammed shut was Kalia, collapsed on the floor, weeping luminous blue tears, reaching out for him across the widening distance. And in the back of his mind, a voice that was not his own whispered, "I am here. I am here." The taste of ozone was the first thing Noah noticed. It was not in his mouth. It was a phantom sensation, a metallic tang that coated the back of his throat, accompanied by a sharp, rhythmic spiking of adrenaline that did not belong to him. He opened his eyes. He was floating. The cell was a perfect sphere of matte white material, devoid of corners or shadows. The gravity was dampened to a nauseating fraction of Earth standard, leaving him drifting a few inches above the floor. There were no bars, no doors, only the seamless white curve and a soft, humming silence that pressed against his eardrums. But it was not silent, not in his head. Images flashed behind his eyes like strobe lights. A long corridor of shifting violet crystal, the texture of smooth, cold armor under his fingertips, the smell of burning incense and fear. He blinked, shaking his head, trying to clear the hallucinations, but they only sharpened. He felt a sudden, crushing wave of humiliation, followed instantly by a flare of hot, defensive anger. Get out of my head, Noah thought, the soldier's instinct to secure his perimeter kicking in even within his own mind. He realized with a jolt that the thought had echoed. It had not just stayed in his skull, it had traveled, bouncing off a wall that wasn't there and vanishing into a void that felt vast and terrified. The wall of his cell dissolved. It did not slide open. It simply evaporated into mist, revealing the corridor beyond. Two guards in black, non-reflective armor stepped in. They did not speak. One of them gestured with a suppression rod, a dark baton that sucked the light from the air around it. Noah, his muscles stiff and aching from the previous day's beating, lowered his boots to the floor as the gravity normalized with a sickening lurch. "Walk, human," the guard said. The voice was synthesized, coming from a translator unit on his collar. Noah walked. He had no choice. But as he moved through the alien corridors, he stumbled. His balance was off. He felt taller. For a split second, the floor seemed further away than it should have been, and he had the dizzying sensation of looking at himself from a high angle, seeing the back of his own head. He shook it off, sweating cold. The sensory echoes were getting worse. They marched him into an interrogation chamber that looked less like a room and more like the inside of a geode. The walls were jagged, raw amethyst, lit from within by pulsating veins of light. In the center of the room sat First Princess Lysara. She did not sit. She occupied the space. Her throne was a growth of the floor itself, black roots twisted into a high-backed seat. She was flanked by 3 advisors, tall, skeletal Sarathi in gray robes, and 2 scribes whose hands hovered over floating holographic slates. Lysara watched Noah approach. Her bioluminescence was dim, a slow, predatory pulse of indigo along her cheekbones. "Kneel," one of the advisors barked. "I prefer to stand," Noah said. His voice was raspy, his throat dry. Lysara raised a hand, silencing the advisor. "Let him stand. It makes the fall more significant." She leaned forward, her golden eyes locking onto his. Noah felt a pressure in his chest, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. "You have created a significant diplomatic incident, Lieutenant Reyes," Lysara said softly. The softness was worse than the shouting. Her voice carried the vibration of a tectonic plate shifting deep underground. "I saved her life," Noah said. He kept his posture rigid, parade rest. "I reacted to a threat. That is what soldiers do." "You reacted," Lysara repeated. She stood up, and the movement was fluid, like water flowing uphill. "You tackled a daughter of the imperial bloodline. You covered her with your body, and then, in full view of the High Council and your own delegation, you performed the rite of Kalvai. I do not know what that is," Noah said. "Do not lie to me." Lysara's voice cracked like a whip, and the light in the room flared red in response to her anger. "You pressed your forehead to hers. You looked into her eyes. You swore an oath to preserve her life above your own." Noah blinked, confused. "I was checking for a concussion. I was trying to keep her conscious." On Earth, pressing foreheads is a grounding technique. It is a way to share calm, to let someone know they are not alone. The advisors gasped. The sound was a collective intake of breath that hissed through their teeth. The scribes frantically tapped at their slates. Lysara stared at him, her expression shifting from fury to a look of profound, horrified disgust. "You admit it," she whispered. "You admit that you initiated a soul-binding intimacy, a gesture we reserve for the deepest, most private moment of a union. And you say you did it to share calm." "It was a comfort gesture," Noah insisted, frustration rising, like holding a hand. "You bound your nervous system to hers," Lysara shouted, the restraint finally snapping. "You forced a resonance cascade. Do you have any idea what you have done? You have not just touched her, human. You have walked into the sanctuary of her mind and left your muddy boot prints on the altar." Before Noah could respond, the heavy doors of the chamber hissed open. Kalia stormed in. She was not wearing her armor. She wore a simple tunic of white silk, her arms bare, the bandage on her injury glowing faintly. Her eyes were wild, darting around the room until they landed on Noah. Noah felt the impact before she even spoke. It was a physical slam in his chest, a rush of relief so intense it made his knees buckle. He felt her heartbeat sync with his own, a double-thump rhythm that hammered against his ribs. He felt her fear, cold and sharp, and beneath it, a blazing, irrational anger at her mother. "Mother, stop!" Kalia shouted. She ignored the guards who tried to block her path, shoving past them with a burst of sparks. "Kalia, leave this chamber," Lysara commanded, though her voice wavered slightly. "This creature is dangerous." "He is not a creature." Kalia stood between Noah and the throne, her back to him. She was trembling. Noah could feel the tremors as if they were his own. He could feel the heat radiating off her skin. "He is my..." She stopped. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrified. "Husband?" Lysara supplied the word, her tone dripping with venom. Kalia flinched. Noah felt the flinch as a sharp sting in his neck. "I demand to see the healers," Kalia said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I demand a scan. If this is a bond, we need to know the depth of it." Lysara stared at her daughter for a long moment, her golden eyes unreadable. Then she waved a hand. "Bring the weavers." The court healers were different from the other Sarathi. They were smaller, their skin nearly translucent, their eyes covered by silver visors. They did not touch Noah or Kalia. Instead, they spun complex webs of shimmering hard light between them, checking the resonance frequencies. As the webs connected them, Noah gasped. The sensation was electric. He could suddenly smell the perfume Kalia was wearing, a scent like crushed lilies and ozone. He could feel the fabric of her tunic against her skin. He could feel the dull ache in her injured arm. And she could feel him. Noah saw Kalia's eyes widen. He knew what she was feeling. The phantom pain in his knee from an old shrapnel wound. The crushing weight of his guilt over the war. The deep, exhausted loneliness he carried like a backpack. He tried to pull back, to wall off his mind, but it was like trying to hold back the tide with a sieve. The lead weaver lowered his hands. The shimmering webs faded, but the connection remained. "It is confirmed, Your Highness," the weaver said, his voice devoid of emotion. "A grade 4 synchrony. Neural pathways are mirrored. Sensory input is shared. Emotional bleed is constant." "Is it reversible?" Lysara asked, her voice tight. The weaver paused, only by the cessation of neural activity in one or both subjects. "Death." Noah translated flatly. "You mean death?" Lysara looked at Noah. For a second, he thought she was going to order it right then and there. "Take him back to the cell," Lysara said, turning her back. "I must convene the High Council." Kalia turned to Noah, her eyes swimming with tears. "Noah, Go," Noah said, his voice rough. He tried to project reassurance, but he knew she could feel his terror. "Just go." The High Council chamber was a kaleidoscope of shouting. 50 senators stood on floating platforms. their voices amplifying and overlapping in a cacophony of alien languages and dialects. "He must be executed," Lord Varshian shouted. Varshian was a towering figure in crimson robes, his face a mask of sharp angles and sharper cruelty. He gestured violently with a clawed hand. "The human has deployed a bioweapon. He has enslaved the second princess with forbidden psychic technology. He saved her life," another counselor argued, a female with green bioluminescence. "If he wanted to kill her, he would not have shielded her body." "It does not matter what he wanted," Varshian roared. "Look at them. The bond is an abomination. A human walking inside the mind of a Sarathi royal. It is a security breach of the highest order. He knows our location. He knows our codes. He knows the princess's thoughts. And what of the treaty?" The Earth ambassador's voice cut through the noise, though he was not present physically. His holographic projection flickered in the center of the room. "If you execute a member of my delegation, a war hero no less, there will be no peace. There will be fire." Lysara sat on her high throne, watching the chaos. She looked tired. Her light was dim. She felt the headache building behind her eyes, a pressure that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the fact that her daughter was currently pacing in her chambers, feeling the emotions of a human prisoner. "We cannot kill him yet," Lysara announced. The chamber went silent. To kill him now would kill Kalia. The bond is too fresh. The shock of severance would shatter her mind. Varshian narrowed his eyes. "Then we use him. If they are bound, let us bind Earth. We hold him hostage. We force concessions. We make the human pet dance, and the princess pulls the strings." Lysara looked at her advisor with cold distaste. "We shall see. For now, he remains in the deep cells." Noah sat on the floor of his white cell. He was trying to meditate, trying to build a wall around his mind, but it was useless. He could feel her pacing. He could feel her agitation like a relentless itch under his skin. He felt a sudden spike of intent, a decision. 10 minutes later, the force field wall dissolved. Kalia stood there. She was alone. She held a small basket of fruit in her hands, looking ridiculous and terrified and regal all at once. "I am exercising my royal prerogative," she told the guard. "Leave us." The guard hesitated, then bowed and retreated down the corridor. Kalia stepped into the cell. The gravity dampeners adjusted to her weight. She set the basket down and looked at Noah. "I brought you food," she said. "It is indigenous. I hope your biology can process fructose." Noah looked at the fruit. It looked like blue grenades. "Thank you, Your Highness." She winced. "Please, do not call me that. Not when I can feel you rolling your eyes in your head." Noah let out a short, startled laugh. "I wasn't rolling my eyes, I was adjusting my perception." "You were thinking that I look like a frightened bird," Kalia said. She sat down on the floor, crossing her legs. Her armor was gone, and she looked smaller, softer. "I was thinking you look like someone who walked into a minefield without a map," Noah corrected gently. He sat down across from her, keeping a respectful distance. Kalia picked up a piece of fruit and turned it over in her hands. "Husband," she said. Noah flinched. "Stop. Please, do not use that word." "Why?" Kalia asked, a mischievous glint entering her eyes. "It is what you are. The bond does not lie. You pledged your soul." "I pledged to keep you from bleeding out on a banquet table," Noah said, rubbing his face. "On Earth, marriage involves paperwork, a ceremony, usually a lot of cake. It is a choice. Kalia, it is two people deciding to be together, not an accident." Kalia's smile faded. She looked down at her hands. For my people, marriage is never a choice. It is a treaty, a merging of bloodlines for political stability. I was betrothed to Lord Varshian's son since I was 3 cycles old. I have never chosen anything in my life. Noah watched her. He felt a wave of sadness radiating from her, deep and heavy as the ocean. He forgot himself for a moment. He forgot the guards, the cell, the alien planet. He just saw a woman who was trapped. So this accident, he said softly, is the first thing that belongs just to you? Kalia looked up, her golden eyes locked with his. The bond flared. It wasn't a thought, it was a sensation. Noah was suddenly overwhelmed by the memory of the attack. The smell of smoke, the weight of her body in his arms, and the way her eyes had looked, wide and trusting. And then, unbidden, a fantasy pushed its way from the back of his reptile brain to the forefront of his mind. He saw himself in the corridor. He saw himself pulling her close, not to protect her, but to kiss her. He felt the phantom sensation of her mouth against his, the heat of her skin, the desperate, life-affirming contact of 2 survivors finding each other in the dark. The image was so vivid it hung in the air between them like a hologram. Kalia gasped. Her bioluminescence flared bright pink, the color of shock and arousal. Noah scrambled back, his face burning hot. I am sorry, I didn't mean to project that. Kalia stared at him, her lips parted. She raised a hand to her own mouth, her eyes wide. You want to... It was a stray thought, Noah stammered, looking anywhere but at her. Adrenaline, stress. It's a biological reaction to survival. It means nothing. Kalia went quiet. She lowered her hand. She could feel his embarrassment, his shame, but she could also feel the truth underneath it, the attraction, the pull. She felt it too. It did not feel like nothing, she whispered. They sat in silence, the air between them charged with a tension that was thicker than the cell walls. They were 2 strangers who knew each other's darkest secrets. They were enemies who were part of the same soul. I should go, Kalia said abruptly, standing up. Her movements were jerky. Yes, Noah said, not looking up. You should. Later that night, or what passed for night in the eternal glow of the palace, Noah was trying to sleep. He was drifting in that halfway state between waking and dreaming when the bond glitch happened. His vision blurred. The white ceiling of his cell was replaced by a dark, ornately carved room. He wasn't seeing through his own eyes, he was seeing through Kalia's. But she wasn't looking at anything in particular. She was walking down a hallway. Perhaps sleepwalking, or perhaps just wandering, lost in thought. But Noah's soldier hearing picked up what she was missing. Voices, coming from a ventilation grate near the floor. He focused. He pushed his consciousness toward the sound, riding the wave of Kalia's proximity. Cannot wait for the trial, a voice hissed. It was Varshian. Noah recognized the cadence. The human is resilient. He might survive the questioning. We need a catalyst, another voice said. A deeper, more mechanical voice. An accident. The trial is in 2 days, Varshian said. The public will be watching. If the human were to... snap. If he were to attack the princess again, in a fit of alien madness, and the guards were forced to put them both down. Both of them? The second voice asked. Lysara is weak, Varshian replied. She clings to the peace. But if her daughter is butchered by a human savage on live broadcast, she will have no choice. She will have to declare war. The peace dies with the girl. Noah snapped back into his own body. He sat up, gasping for air, his heart hammering against his ribs. They weren't just going to kill him. They were going to kill Kalia. He reached out with his mind. Kalia. But the line was dead. She was asleep, or too far away. The connection was dormant. The next morning, Kalia stood before her mother in the royal chambers. "Release him," Kalia said. Her voice was steady, though her hands were shaking. Lysara did not look up from her desk. She was signing execution orders for the insurgents captured during the attack. "No, he saved me." "Mother." Kalia stepped forward. "He did not force this bond. It was an accident. He is a good man. I can feel him. There is no malice in him. Only sadness and honor." "Honor?" Lysara laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "He is a soldier of Earth. They bombed our colony on Rythos. They burned the sacred groves. Do not speak to me of human honor." "That was war," Kalia argued. "This is peace, or it is supposed to be. If you kill him, you kill the peace. If I let him live—" "I show weakness," Lysara countered, slamming her hand down on the desk. The desk groaned. "The council smells blood. Kalia, Varshian is circling. If I appear compromised by affection for a human, they will move against me." "So you will sacrifice me?" Kalia asked, her voice quieting. "Because if he dies, part of me dies." The healers said it. Lysara looked at her daughter. For a moment, the mask of the first princess slipped, revealing the terrified mother beneath. "I am trying to save you," Lysara whispered. "I am trying to keep the empire from burning. Sometimes, Kalia. Sometimes feelings must bow to necessity." Kalia stared at her mother. Then she turned and walked out. She did not go to her room. She went down through the spiraling levels of the palace, past the startled guards, down to the deep cells. She stopped at the force field of Noah's cell. He was standing there, waiting for her. He looked exhausted. His uniform was rumpled, his face unshaven. "You heard," Kalia said. It wasn't a question. She could feel that he knew. Noah nodded. "Varshian. He is planning to kill us both at the trial." Kalia pressed her hand against the shimmering energy field. It hummed, stinging her palm. But she didn't pull away. "My mother won't listen," she said, her voice breaking. "She thinks she can control this. She thinks she can manage the politics. She doesn't see the knife at her throat." Noah stepped closer. He raised his hand and placed it on the field, directly opposite hers. They were separated by 2 inches of lethal energy. "We have to run," Noah said. "How?" Kalia laughed, a sound bordering on hysteria. "We are in the most secure facility in the galaxy. And even if we got out, where would we go?" "Anywhere," Noah said. He looked at her hand through the field. He wanted to touch her. The urge was a physical ache, a hunger that had nothing to do with sex and everything to do with survival. As if he had spoken aloud. Kalia looked up, her eyes locked on his. The bond surged. It wasn't a trickle this time. It was a dam breaking. Noah felt her loneliness. It was a vast, cold cavern where she had lived her entire life, surrounded by people but never known. He felt her desperate need to be seen, not as a symbol, not as a treaty piece, but as herself. And she felt his desire. It was dark and hot and terrified. It was the desire of a man who had accepted death a long time ago and was suddenly, violently terrified of dying because he had found something worth living for. They breathed in sync. The air in the cell crackled. The force field between their hands began to whine, the frequency destabilizing as their bioelectric resonance hit a peak. "Open it," Noah whispered. Kalia trembled. "If I open it." "I am a traitor. If you don't," Noah said. "We are ghosts." They stood there, hands pressed to the barrier, the air screaming around them, suspended on the razor's edge of a choice that would burn the galaxy down, deep in the lower maintenance levels, in a room shielded from all sensors. Lord Varshian met with a figure cloaked in shadow. "Is the device ready?" Varshian asked. The figure stepped forward. It was a Sarathi militant, his face scarred, his eyes burning with fanaticism. "It is ready. A micro-pulse charge. We will plant it under the human's podium. And the trigger?" The militant smiled, a gruesome baring of teeth. "The trigger is keyed to the princess's biosignature. When she steps close to him, when she tries to plead for his life, boom!" Varshian finished softly. "A tragic accident," the militant said. "The human's unstable technology. A suicide vest. The narrative writes itself." Varshian nodded, turning to look at a holographic map of the galaxy. "Let them have their bond," he said. "Let them be together, in the fire, and then let the war begin." The announcement of the trial of Lieutenant Noah Reyes was not merely a news bulletin. It was a planetary event. The atmosphere of Virlan, usually a tranquil wash of pastel violets and shifting auroras, seemed to curdle into something gray and oppressive. Every holographic surface in the capital city, from the massive public information spires to the personal wrist links of the citizens, projected the seal of the High Council. The trial was to be broadcast live to the furthest reaches of the Sarathi Empire. It was spectacle masquerading as justice. Inside the Earth diplomatic quarters, Ambassador Sterling was pacing a hole in the plush living carpet. He was shouting at a projection of the Sarathi Minister of Protocol. "This is a farce," Sterling yelled. His face flushed a dangerous shade of red. "You are putting a decorated war hero on display like a criminal. If you execute him, you are not just killing a man. You are killing the ceasefire. You are lighting a fuse that burns all the way back to Earth." The minister, a slender Sarathi with scales the color of pale jade, remained impassive. "The decision of the first princess is final. Ambassador, the human crossed a line that is sacred to our people. He must answer for it in the High Hall." Sterling cut the feed with a violent swipe of his hand. He turned to his aides. "Get me the president. Tell her we are about to watch a murder on live television, deep within the organic labyrinth of the palace." First Princess Lysara stood on the balcony of her private sanctum. She looked out over the city she ruled, but her golden eyes saw nothing of its beauty. She saw only threats. She saw the fleet of Earth ships parked just outside the sensory perimeter, their weapons powered down but ready. She saw the shadowed corners of her own council chamber, where whispers of treason had turned into roars of dissent. She pressed a hand to her temple. The headache was a constant companion now. "Commander," she said to the air. The captain of the Royal Guard stepped out of the shadows. "Your Highness, double the guard detail in the High Hall," Lysara ordered. "I want scanners on every entrance. I want suppression fields active on the balconies." "You suspect an attempt to rescue the human?" the captain asked. "I suspect everything," Lysara said coldly. She did not trust Noah Reyes. To her, he was a chaotic element, a stone thrown into the delicate machinery of her empire. But she was not a fool. She sensed a vibration in the air, a tension that felt less like justice and more like a trap. If Noah died today, her daughter's mind might shatter from the shock of the severed bond. If he lived, the council would riot. She was walking a razor's edge, and she was doing it in heavy ceremonial robes. 2 hours before the trial, the force field of Noah's cell dissolved. He stood up from the bench, smoothing the wrinkles in his dress uniform. He had expected guards to drag him out. Instead, Kalia stepped inside. She looked exhausted, her bioluminescence, Usually a vibrant, pulsing blue was dim and steady, the sign of a Sarathi running on reserve energy. She wore formal court attire, a high-collared tunic of woven silver mesh and a cape that drifted around her ankles like smoke. "You look like you are going to a funeral," Noah said. Kalia managed a weak, lopsided smile. "It is a trial." "Noah. Though with my mother presiding, the difference is often academic." She stepped closer, the gravity dampeners of the cell adjusting to her presence. The air between them instantly grew warmer. The bond, which they had both been trying to suppress, flared to life. Noah felt her anxiety hit him like a physical wave of nausea. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to remain steady, to be a solid wall she could lean against. "I brought you something," she said. She reached into the folds of her cape and pulled out a small metallic disc. "It is a sensory dampener. If you wear it behind your ear, it will mute the crowd noise, the high hall. It gets loud, and with the bond, you will be hearing my heartbeat loud enough to drown out the charges." Noah took the disc. His fingers brushed hers. The contact sent a spark of electricity up his arm, making the hair stand up on his neck. "Thank you," he said. He looked at the device, then back at her. "So this is the plan. We go up there, they read a list of crimes I did not commit. And then what? And then I testify," Kalia said fiercely. "I will tell them the truth, that you saved me, that this was not a weapon, but a rescue. And if they do not listen, then we have a very short marriage," Kalia joked, though her voice trembled. "Our honeymoon being a cell and an execution was not exactly what I dreamed of as a girl. I always imagined something with more oceans and fewer death threats." Noah let out a dry laugh. "Look on the bright side. The room service here is terrible, but at least the rent is free." Kalia laughed. It was a genuine sound, bright and surprising in the sterile white room. For a second, the crushing weight of the situation lifted. They were just two people, standing in the eye of a hurricane, sharing a bad joke. The laughter faded into a heavy silence. Kalia looked up at him, her golden eyes searching his face. "Noah," she said softly, "I am sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for," Noah said. "I do," she insisted. "You are here because of me, because I was careless during the attack, because my biology decided to claim you without asking." Noah shook his head. He took a step closer, breaking the unspoken rule of distance they had maintained. "Listen to me," he said. "On Earth, we have a saying, you play the hand you are dealt. We did not ask for this. I did not ask to have a princess inside my head, feeling my nightmares. And you certainly did not ask for a human soldier with too much baggage and not enough diplomacy." He paused, lowering his voice. "But if I had to be bound to someone, if I had to trust someone with my life, I am glad it is you." Kalia's breath hitched. She felt the truth of his words vibrating through the bond. There was no deception in him, no political maneuvering, just a raw, honest, terrifying sincerity. "I have never chosen anything," Kalia whispered. "My schools, my training, my betrothal to Varshian's son. It was all decided before I was born." She looked down at her hands, clenching them into fists. "But I want to choose this. I want to choose you. Not because of the ritual, but because you are the first person who ever looked at me and saw Kalia, not the second princess. Even if the universe says I shouldn't, even if it kills us." Noah felt a surge of emotion from her, desire, rebellion, and a profound, aching sweetness that nearly knocked him over. He wanted to reach out. He wanted to pull her close and promise her that he would burn the whole empire down before he let anyone hurt her. But he didn't. He held his hands at his sides. "I will not claim you, Kalia," he said firmly. "Not by a ritual I do not understand. If we get out of this, if there is a tomorrow, it has to be your choice. Every single day." "It is," she said. The corridor outside echoed with the heavy tread of boots. The guards were coming. Kalia straightened her spine. Her bioluminescence flared brighter. Armor for the soul. "Ready?" she asked. Noah placed the dampener behind his ear. "As ready as I will ever be." The high hall was a cavern of light and judgment. The ceiling arched 300 feet overhead, a lattice of living crystal that refracted the twin suns of the system into dazzling beams of color. Floating galleries hovered in the air, packed with thousands of Sarathi citizens, nobles, and military officers. Millions more watched via the holographic drones that buzzed near the ceiling like angry hornets. Noah walked down the long central promenade. His wrists were bound in suppression cuffs, heavy bands of black metal that dampened his muscle strength. He walked with his head up, ignoring the jeers and hisses that rained down from the galleries. Lysara sat on the high dais at the far end, a figure of terrible majesty. To her right sat the High Council, with Lord Varshian looking like a vulture anticipating a meal. To her left, standing alone, was Kalia. Noah took his place in the center of the interrogation circle. The floor beneath him was transparent, showing the churning magma far deep in the planet's mantle, a reminder of the power the Sarathi commanded. The High Inquisitor, a wizened Sarathi with robes of gray dust, stepped forward. "Lieutenant Noah Reyes of Earth," the Inquisitor intoned, his voice amplified to boom through the hall. "You stand accused of high treason against the crown, the use of forbidden psychic weaponry, and the corruption of the imperial bloodline. How do you plead?" Noah opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a jolt of pain hit him. It wasn't his pain. He looked at Kalia. She was scanning the crowd, her body tense. Through the bond, Noah felt what she felt, a sudden spiking sensation of wrongness. It was a flavor of rage that tasted like copper and old blood. It wasn't the general hostility of the crowd. It was focused, sharp. Someone is here. Kalia's thought echoed in his mind. Someone who shouldn't be. She looked up at the floating galleries. Her eyes narrowed. She focused on a group of guards stationed on the third-tier balcony. They were standing too still. Their energy signatures, which she could sense faintly, were spiking. "Noah," she projected. 3 o'clock high. The guards." Noah shifted his gaze without turning his head. He saw them. 3 guards. They weren't watching the crowd. They were watching the dais. They were watching Lysara. "Get down!" Noah shouted. His warning was swallowed by the roar of the explosion. The floor of the high hall, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, shattered. Charges planted deep within the crystalline structure detonated in a synchronized wave. The transparent floor beneath the council seats disintegrated. Chaos erupted. The floating galleries swayed violently as the anti-grav generators failed. Screams tore through the air. From the balconies, the guards threw off their cloaks. Then they were not royal guard. They were insurgents, heavily armed with plasma repeaters and kinetic launchers. They opened fire. Bolts of green energy strafed the dais. Lysara threw up a bioelectric shield, a dome of crackling light, but the impact hammered her to her knees. Lord Varshian had already vanished, diving for cover with suspicious speed. Noah was thrown to the ground as the floor near him buckled. He struggled to rise, but the suppression cuffs turned his arms into lead weights. He saw a masked attacker leap from the lower balcony, a vibro blade in hand, sprinting toward him. He couldn't move fast enough. Then Kalia was there. She didn't run. She blurred, moving with the speed of a striking viper. She vaulted over the debris field. She landed beside Noah, her hand glowing with white-hot energy. She didn't aim for the attacker. She aimed for Noah. She slammed her hand onto his suppression cuffs. "Hold still!" she screamed. She unleashed a concentrated pulse of bioelectricity. It was a risky maneuver, enough voltage to stop a heart, but she channeled it directly into the locking mechanism. The black metal exploded, shattering into useless fragments. Noah roared as his strength returned. The attacker was on them. Noah didn't think. He pivoted on one foot, using the momentum of his release to drive his elbow into the attacker's throat. The Sarathi crumbled. Noah grabbed the falling vibro blade before it hit the ground. "Move!" Noah yelled. He grabbed Kalia's hand. The bond snapped into a combat frequency. It was no longer a distraction, it was a targeting computer. Noah saw what she saw. Kalia felt what he felt. Left! Kalia's mind screamed. Noah ducked instantly, pulling Kalia with him. A plasma bolt scorched the air where his head had been. "Clear right," Noah projected. Kalia spun, unleashing a blast of kinetic force that knocked two attackers off the walkway. They moved as a single organism with 4 arms and 2 operational perspectives. They sprinted across the crumbling hall, weaving through the falling debris. The main exit was blocked by a wall of fire. "The dais!" Kalia shouted over the din. "My mother!" They looked toward the throne. Lysara's shield was failing. 5 attackers were pouring fire into it. She was pinned. "We can't reach her." Noah assessed instantly. "The bridge is gone." The central walkway connecting them to the dais had collapsed into the magma pit below. They were cut off. "We have to go." Noah pulled her toward a service alcove. "If we stay, we die, and we can't help her if we are dead." Kalia hesitated, looking back at her mother. Through the smoke, Lysara locked eyes with her daughter. The first princess gave a single, sharp nod. "Go." A massive section of the ceiling groaned and detached, plummeting toward them. "Now!" "Kalia!" Noah tackled her into the alcove just as the ceiling smashed into the promenade, obliterating where they had stood a second before. The impact shook the foundation of the palace. The floor of the alcove gave way. They fell. They tumbled into darkness, sliding down a steep, slick chute designed for waste disposal. They hit the bottom hard, landing in a pile of dust and fibrous insulation material. Noah rolled to his feet instantly. The vibro blade raised. It was pitch black, save for the faint, frantic pulsing of Kalia's bioluminescence. "Clear," he whispered. Kalia sat up, coughing. The dust coated her silver tunic, turning it gray. She wiped her face, her hands trembling. "My mother," she gasped. "She is alive," Noah said, though he didn't know for sure. He offered her a hand. "We have to keep moving. They will sweep the lower levels." Kalia took his hand. She pulled herself up, but she didn't let go. She stumbled forward, colliding with his chest. The adrenaline of the fight was still coursing through them, fueled by the bond. In the dark, narrow tunnel, the sensory input was overwhelming. Noah could feel the rapid-fire beat of her heart against his own ribs. He could taste the adrenaline on her tongue. He wrapped his arms around her to steady her. She clung to him, her fingers digging into the fabric of his uniform. "They are trying to kill us," she whispered, her voice ragged. "Not just arrest us, eliminate us." "I know," Noah said. His voice was low, a rumble in the dark. He looked down at her. Her face was inches from his. The blue light of her skin illuminated the terror in her eyes, but also something else. A fierce, burning vitality. The bond pulled at them. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was the desperate need for affirmation, for life in the face of death. The air between them grew heavy, charged with static. Noah leaned in. Kalia tilted her head back. Their lips were a breath apart. Noah could feel the ghost of the kiss before it happened, the softness, the heat, the release. Stop. Noah breathed. He pulled back, his hands gripping her shoulders, pushing her gently away. He was shaking. If we do this now, he said, his voice rough, it is just the fear talking. It is the bond. Kalia stared at him, her chest heaving. She looked hurt, then confused, and finally, she nodded. You are right, she whispered. You are right. She stepped back, smoothing her ruined tunic. She took a deep breath, and her lights stabilized. Okay, she said. Okay, we need a way out. She looked around the tunnel. The walls were lined with conduit pipes and ancient service panels. This is the substructure, she said, her voice shifting into command mode. These tunnels run beneath the magma tap. They connect to the old starport logistics grid. Noah nodded, impressed by her quick recovery. Lead the way, princess. They moved through the tunnels for what felt like hours. The air was hot and smelled of sulfur. They had to navigate over burst pipes and under collapsed support beams. As they reached a junction, they found a heavy blast door sealed shut. This should be open, Kalia said, examining the control panel. It is a manual override. Noah examined the mechanism. It had been fused shut, melted by a plasma torch. Sabotage, Noah said grimly. They sealed the escape routes. This wasn't just an attack, it was a coup. They had people inside the maintenance crews. Inside the palace? Kalia asked, horrified. That is impossible. The vetting process is run by the council. Noah finished. Varshian. They were forced to double back, taking a narrower, older corridor that smelled of damp earth. As they rounded a corner, they almost ran into a figure crouching by an open panel. Noah raised the blade. Don't shoot, the figure squeaked. It was a Sarathi, but he looked nothing like the nobles in the high hall. He was short, his scales were a dull, dusty gray, and he wore a ragged utility jumpsuit. He held a hydro spanner like a weapon. Who are you? Noah demanded. I am Tech, the Sarathi stammered. Third-tier sanitation engineer. I am just fixing the airflow. I didn't set the bombs, I swear. Tech looked at Kalia and his eyes widened. The second princess? Kalia stepped forward. You know who I am? Everyone knows the light of the spire, Tech said, bowing so low his nose almost touched the grimy floor. Please, Your Highness, do not purge me. I have a broodmate. Purge you? Kalia frowned. Why would I purge you? Because I am here, Tech said, trembling. We are not supposed to be seen by the High Bloods. It is the law. Kalia looked at Noah, confusion on her face. Is that a law? Noah looked at Tech, then at the princess. You have lived in that tower your whole life. Kalia. You never looked down? Kalia looked at the shivering engineer. She realized, with a sudden pang of guilt, that she had walked past thousands of workers like Tech in the corridors of the palace and never once registered their faces. They were furniture to her. Tech, she said softly. Stand up. Tech stood, shaking. We are not going to hurt you, Kalia said. We are running away like you. Tech blinked. Running? From the bad men in the black masks? You saw them? Noah asked. Tech nodded vigorously. I saw them in the loading bay 2 cycles ago when they were moving crates. Heavy ones, not palace supplies. What was in the crates? Noah asked. Tech looked around nervously, then tapped his wrist comp. He projected a small, flickering holographic manifest. I stole the scan. I thought maybe it was food I could sell. But it wasn't food. Noah leaned in. The manifest was encrypted, but the headers were clear. Class A disruptor rifles. Seismic charges, origin Imperial Armory. Destination Nix Terrell. Nix Terrell? Kalia asked. That is a fringe world, a wasteland. Why would they send weapons there? To arm an army, Noah said darkly. An army that isn't on the official books. Tech, Noah said. Can you get us to a ship? Any ship. Tech hesitated. There is a courier dock near the waste expulsion port. The guards don't check it often, but the ships are locked. Kalia touched the engineer's shoulder. Tech flinched, then relaxed. Help us. Tech, please. And I promise you, when I come back, the laws will change. No one will be invisible anymore. Tech looked at her. He saw the dirt on her face, the desperation in her eyes. He saw a princess begging a plumber. Follow me, Tech said. The courier dock was a cavernous hangar filled with small, sleek vessels designed for speed, not comfort. Tech led them to a Star Swift-class jumper, a ship that was essentially a cockpit strapped to two massive engines. The override code is a standard maintenance loop, Tech explained, his fingers flying over the keypad on the docking strut. I use it to nap inside during shift breaks. The airlock hissed open. Thank you, Noah said. He grabbed Tech's hand and shook it, a human gesture that confused the engineer but seemed to please him. Get out of here, Tech. Go deep. Don't let them find you. Tech nodded and scurried back into the shadows. Noah and Kalia strapped into the cockpit. It was tight, their shoulders pressed together. Can you fly this? Kalia asked. It has wings and a thruster, Noah said, powering up the console. I can fly a brick if it has a thruster. He punched the ignition. The engines roared to life, a high-pitched whine that vibrated through the hull. Alert! The ship's computer chimed. Unauthorized departure. Defense drones activated. We have company, Kalia shouted, pointing at the viewport. 3 automated defense drones dropped from the ceiling clamps. They were spherical, spinning rapidly, weapons charging. Hold on! Noah slammed the throttle forward. The ship shot out of the hangar like a bullet. The G-force slammed them back into their seats. Noah yanked the stick hard to the left, rolling the ship 90 degrees to slip through the closing blast doors of the outer wall. Sparks showered the hull as they scraped through. They burst out into the Virlan sky. The drones followed, firing red bursts of laser fire. Shields are down, Kalia yelled, checking the readouts. I know! Noah gritted his teeth. He dove the ship toward the city skyline, weaving between the crystalline spires. He used the architecture as cover, banking hard around a massive violet tower. The drones tried to follow. 2 of them couldn't make the turn. They smashed into the crystal surface and exploding in balls of fire. The 3rd one was still on their tail. It is locking a missile, Kalia warned. Noah pulled up, shooting straight toward the upper atmosphere. The sky turned from lavender to black. Do you have any bioelectric charge left? Noah asked. A little, Kalia said. Why? I need you to overload the rear sensor array. What? That will blind us. It will blind the missile too. Do it. Kalia placed her hands on the dashboard. She closed her eyes and screamed, pushing the last of her energy into the ship's systems. A pulse of blue light erupted from the rear of the ship. The cockpit went dark. The sensors died. Behind them, the missile lost its lock. Confused by the electromagnetic surge, it veered off and detonated harmlessly against the edge of the atmosphere. They punched through the gravity well and into the silence of space. Noah let the ship drift. He kept the engines on a low burn, masking their thermal signature. The cockpit was silent, save for the hum of the life support and their own ragged breathing. Outside the viewport, the stars were a field of cold, unblinking eyes. Virlan hung below them, a glowing marble of violet and blue. Kalia unbuckled her restraints. She floated slightly in the zero gravity, her hair drifting around her face like a halo. She stared out at the planet. "I can't go back," she whispered. "Not yet," Noah said softly. She turned to look at him. There were tears floating in her eyes, unshed spheres of liquid light. "I chose," she said. "I chose to run. I chose to leave my mother. I chose to side with a human against the council. I am a traitor. Noah, by every law of my people, I am a traitor." Noah unbuckled and pushed himself off his seat. He grabbed a handhold and floated next to her. "You are not a traitor," he said. "You are a patriot. You are saving your people from a war they have been tricked into wanting." Kalia looked at him. The bond was quiet now. A steady, warm hum in the back of her mind. It felt right. It felt like the only solid thing in a universe that had just dissolved. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was tight, desperate. "Where do we go?" she asked. Noah looked at the star chart. He traced a line to a sector of space marked with warnings and hazard symbols. "Nix Terrell," he said. "We go to where the weapons are. We find the proof, and we bring it back." He looked her in the eye. "I promised I wouldn't let you die. Kalia, I intend to keep that promise, even if I have to fight the whole empire to do it." Kalia nodded. She squeezed his hand. "Then take us out." "Husband," she said. Noah smiled, a grim, determined expression. He engaged the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the ship vanished into the void. The courier ship Star Swift was designed for speed, efficiency, and the transport of encrypted data packets. It was not designed for human habitation. And it was certainly not designed for a Sarathi princess who had spent her entire life in rooms larger than most terrestrial houses. The journey to Nix Terrell took 4 days in hyperspace. For Noah and Kalia, it felt like 4 years compressed into a shoebox. The living quarters consisted of a single bunk, a sanitation unit that made terrifying vacuum noises, and a food replicator that seemed to have only 2 settings, tepid sludge and boiling sludge. The air in the cabin was recycled so many times it tasted metallic, a constant reminder that they were drifting through the void with nothing separating them from death but a few inches of hull plating. On the 2nd day, Noah found Kalia staring at the waste disposal unit with an expression of profound defeat. She was holding a ration wrapper, her bioluminescence dim and gray. "It does not open," Kalia said, her voice tight. "You have to press the pedal with your foot," Noah said from the pilot's chair, not looking up from the navigational charts. "It is mechanical, not biosensitive." Kalia looked at her foot, then at the pedal. She pressed it. The lid snapped open with a clang that made her jump. She dropped the wrapper in and stepped back as it snapped shut. "Your technology is aggressive," she muttered, wiping her hands on her tunic. "Everything requires force, hitting, pressing, stomping. It is very, human. It is called tactile feedback," Noah said, turning the chair around. "And stop trying to clean the air vents. You are going to trigger a depressurization alarm." "I am not cleaning," Kalia argued, crossing her arms. "I am organizing. This ship is a chaotic mess of wires and dust. How do you live like this?" Noah looked at her. She was trying so hard to maintain her royal composure, but the silver mesh of her tunic was stained with grease from the maintenance tunnel, and her hair was tied back with a piece of wire she had found on the floor. She looked ridiculous. She looked beautiful. "I don't live like this," Noah said gently. "I usually have a larger apartment. And a cat." "You have a predator in your living space?" Kalia asked, horrified. "A very small, very lazy predator," Noah corrected. He stood up and walked to the replicator. You need to eat. Your levels are dropping. I can feel your blood sugar crashing from here. I cannot eat another nutrient block, Kalia said, looking nauseous. They taste like despair. Then let me introduce you to the pinnacle of human culinary achievement, Noah said. He tapped a sequence into the replicator. It whirred, groaned, and produced a steaming bowl of noodles swimming in a dark, salty broth. Behold, Noah said, presenting the bowl with a flourish, the sacred art of instant noodles. Kalia approached the bowl suspiciously. She sniffed it. It smells like sodium and... Fake chicken? Exactly, Noah said, handing her a pair of chopsticks he had synthesized. It is comfort food. It reminds me of rainy nights in Sector 7. Kalia struggled with the chopsticks for a moment before spearing a cluster of noodles and putting them in her mouth. Her eyes went wide. She coughed, her hand flying to her throat. It burns, she wheezed. Why is it so spicy? It is mild. Noah laughed, grabbing a water pouch. Here, drink. Kalia drank, glaring at him over the pouch. Her bioluminescence flushed a bright, indignant pink. You humans are masochists. You weaponize your soup. Noah smiled, leaning against the bulkhead. It is an acquired taste. They stood there in the cramped kitchenette, the silence between them comfortable for the first time. The tension of the escape began to bleed away, replaced by a strange domesticity. They were fugitives, hunted by an empire. But in this small metal bubble, they were just two people arguing about soup. The intimacy of the ship forced them to confront the bond. In the beginning, it was like living in a room with a radio that would not turn off. Noah would feel a sudden spike of anxiety and realize it was Kalia worrying about the fuel levels. Kalia would feel a wave of exhaustion and realize it was Noah's knees aching. They learned to knock. It started as a necessity. On the third cycle, Noah was using the sanitation unit, and Kalia, sitting on the bunk, suddenly felt a vivid, mortifying sense of his privacy being invaded. She had gasped and mentally slammed a door shut. From then on, they visualized it, a barrier, a heavy door between their minds. If they wanted to share a thought or check on the other, they would project a mental image of knocking. Knock, knock, come in. It became a metaphor for everything they were afraid to say out loud. It was a way to establish boundaries in a situation that had stripped them of all autonomy. It was a way to say, I am here, but I respect that you are there. But the nights were harder. The doors didn't stay closed when they slept. Noah's nightmares were jagged and loud. He dreamed of the mud on Rythos 4. He dreamed of the sound of Sarathi energy lances burning through the air, the smell of ozone and cooking meat. He dreamed of the faces of the men in his platoon, looking at him with hollow eyes, asking why he had survived when they had not. Kalia's nightmares were quiet and cold. She dreamed of the high spire. She dreamed of being 6 years old, standing in a circle of elders, being told that her emotions were a weakness, that her tears were a waste of moisture. She dreamed of her mother looking at her not with love, but with appraisal, like a jeweler examining a stone for flaws. On the last night before their arrival, the dreams bled together. Noah woke up with a gasp, his body drenched in sweat. He sat up, his heart hammering against his ribs, his hand grasping for a rifle that wasn't there. He wasn't alone in the dark. Kalia was sitting up on the bunk, her eyes wide and luminous. She was shaking. I saw them, she whispered. Her voice was thin, fragile. The men in the mud. I felt them die. Noah. Noah squeezed his eyes shut. I am sorry. I tried to keep it locked down. You were screaming in your mind, Kalia said. She slid off the bunk and knelt on the floor beside his sleeping mat. She reached out, her hand hovering over his shoulder. Can I? Noah looked at her. He saw the reflection of his own pain in her golden eyes, but he also saw a profound, aching empathy. He nodded. She placed her hand on his bare shoulder. The contact was electric. The bond surged, but instead of the chaos of the nightmare, it brought a wave of cool, steady light. Kalia projected comfort. It wasn't a platitude, it was a sensory experience. It felt like cool water on a burn. It felt like the silence after a storm. Noah let out a long, shuddering breath. He leaned into her touch. I am afraid, he admitted, his voice rough. I am afraid that if I fight again, if I have to kill again, I will just be that weapon. I will lose the part of me that wanted peace. Kalia moved closer. She used her other hand to turn his face toward hers. You are not a weapon, she said fiercely. A weapon does not cook soup. A weapon does not worry about a cat. A weapon does not save a princess and then apologize for the inconvenience. Noah looked at her. In the dim light of the cabin, she looked otherworldly, a creature of starlight and shadow. The bond thrummed between them, shifting from comfort to something hotter, something more urgent. He felt her desire. It wasn't just physical. It was a longing to be close to someone who saw her broken parts and didn't look away. And he knew she could feel his own pull, the magnetic gravity drawing him toward her. Their faces drew near. Noah could feel the warmth of her breath. He could count the specks of gold in her irises. His hand came up, tangling in the hair at the nape of her neck. It would be so easy to close the gap, to let the bond take over and drown the trauma in sensation. Noah stopped. His lips were an inch from hers. No, he whispered. Kalia froze. She pulled back slightly, confusion flickering in her eyes. Why? Not like this, Noah said. He withdrew his hand, though it cost him every ounce of willpower he possessed. Not because we are scared. Not because the ghosts are loud tonight. He took her hand and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. When I kiss you, Kalia, and I want to kiss you, it will be because we are safe. It will be because we chose it. Not because we are using each other to hide from the dark. Kalia stared at him. A single tear, glowing faint blue, rolled down her cheek. She understood. She felt the immense respect in his restraint, the honor that her mother claimed humans did not possess. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She didn't leave. She lay down on the mat beside him, curling up small. Noah lay back down, pulling the thin blanket over them both. They didn't touch, but they left the mental door open. Sleep, Noah thought. I am here. I am here. She answered. Nyx Terrell was a scar on the face of the galaxy. It was a desert world orbiting a binary star system, one yellow sun, one dying red dwarf. The light that filtered down to the surface was a sickly, bruised orange. The planet was a haven for everything the Sarathi Empire and the Earth Coalition wanted to ignore. Smugglers, exiles, failed genetic experiments, and extremists. They landed the Star Swift in a crater that served as a pirate port. The airlock cycled open, and the heat hit them like a physical blow. It was dry, dusty, and smelled of sulfur and unwashed bodies. We need disguises, Noah said, pulling on a hooded cloak he had fabricated from the ship's emergency blankets. Kalia pulled her own cloak tight. She had dimmed her bioluminescence to a faint, dull gray, mimicking the sickly pallor of a radiation-sick local. Stay close, Noah warned. This place makes the underside of Virlan look like a nursery. They walked into the bazaar. It was a sensory assault. Stalls made of rusted ship plating lined the narrow, winding streets. Vendors hawked illegal cyber-organics, eyes, limbs, neural shunts, shouting in a dozen languages. Massive reptilian beasts of burden plodded through the crowd, kicking up clouds of violet dust. Graffiti covered every vertical surface. Death to the Empire was scrawled in jagged Sarathi script next to Earth Go Home in spray paint. They moved through the crowd, arms linked. It was a necessity. In Nyx Terrell, a solitary figure was a target. A couple was a unit. Kalia clung to Noah's arm. She felt the heavy gaze of a four-eyed bounty hunter on her back. She felt the vibration of heavy bass music thumping from underground clubs. "Lean in," Noah whispered in her ear. "Look like you adore me." Kalia looked up at him. She didn't have to act. The fear made her want to burrow into his side. She laughed at something he didn't say, brushing a hand against his chest. "You are enjoying this role-play too much." "Husband," she murmured, the title slipping out with a teasing edge. "It is survival." "Wife," Noah replied, his lips brushing her ear. His stubble grazed her skin, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the desert heat. They followed the coordinates from Tech's stolen manifest. It led them away from the main bazaar, down a darkened alleyway where the sand piled high against the walls. The destination was a cantina carved into the rock face. The sign above the door was a holographic skull that flickered in and out of existence. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the smell of fermented algae. Noah and Kalia found a booth in the deepest shadow. They ordered drinks they didn't touch and waited. 10 minutes later, 3 figures entered. One was a Sarathi noble, his robes dusty but unmistakably high quality. The other 2 were heavily armed mercenaries. They sat at a table near the back. Noah pulled a small listening device from his pocket, another gift from the ship's fabricator, and slid it across the table until it was aimed at the group. He handed Kalia an earpiece. "Listen," he mouthed. The voices came through tinny and distorted, but clear enough. "Shipment is delayed," the noble was saying. "Varshin is growing impatient. The timeline has accelerated." The mercenaries grunted. "The weapons are ready. The target package is confirmed." "When do we strike?" "During the festival of the Twin Moons," the noble said. "In 3 days. We hit the Earth Embassy first. Make it look like a Sarathi nationalist attack. Then we hit the palace shields from the inside." Noah looked at Kalia. Her eyes were wide. "It is not just an assassination," she whispered. "It is a coup." The noble continued. "The High Council is fractured. Once the first princess is dead, the faction for expansion will take control. They need a reason to mobilize the fleet. The death of the princess and the destruction of the embassy will give them the mandate. We will wash the galaxy in fire, and we will start by reclaiming the Earth sector." Kalia's hand gripped Noah's forearm so hard her nails dug into his skin. "They are going to use my death to start a war of extermination." "We have what we need," Noah whispered. "Let's go." They stood up to leave. They moved carefully, keeping their heads down. But as they neared the exit, a massive alien, a bounty hunter with a cybernetic eye, stepped into their path. He sniffed the air. Then his mechanical eye whirred, focusing on Kalia. "Blue blood." The hunter rumbled. "I smell royal blue." Noah didn't hesitate. He shoved Kalia toward the door. "Run!" He drew the vibro blade he had stolen from the palace and slashed at the hunter's legs. The hunter roared, swiping a massive clawed hand. Kalia stumbled out into the alley. "Noah!" Noah rolled under the blow, coming up fast, but the hunter was faster. He backhanded Noah, sending him flying into the stone wall. Noah crumpled, gasping. The hunter raised a plasma pistol. Worth a lot of credits. The human pet. Noah scrambled to his feet, putting himself between the gun and the door. He wasn't going to make it. He knew the geometry of the shot. He braced himself. The hunter fired. Noah took the hit. The plasma bolt grazed his side, burning through the cloak and the uniform beneath. He shouted, falling to his knees, the smell of cauterized flesh filling the alley. Something inside Kalia snapped. She didn't feel fear anymore. She felt a white-hot, blinding supernova of rage. It traveled through the bond, feeding on Noah's pain, magnifying it 1,000 times. She stepped back into the doorway. She threw back her hood. Her bioluminescence didn't just glow. It ignited. She became a beacon of blinding blue light. "Get away from him!" she screamed. She thrust both hands forward. She didn't use the controlled, elegant strikes she had been taught in the dojo. She unleashed the storm. A jagged arc of bioelectricity, thick as a tree trunk, erupted from her palms. It hit the bounty hunter square in the chest. The impact lifted the massive alien off his feet and hurled him 20 feet down the alley. He hit the opposite wall with a bone-shattering crunch and slid down, smoking and unconscious. The other patrons in the cantina froze. They stared at the figure in the doorway, a goddess of vengeance wreathed in lightning. Kalia didn't look at them. She ran to Noah. He was clutching his side, his face pale. "Can you walk?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Noah looked up at her, amazed. "I can run." They ran. They found a safe house in the ruins of an old mining refinery on the edge of the city. It was little more than 4 walls and a roof, half buried in the sand. Inside, Kalia helped Noah sit against the wall. She activated a portable light stick and set it on the floor. "Let me see," she said. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear. The adrenaline was still crashing through her system. Noah hissed as she peeled back the burnt fabric of his tunic. The wound was an angry red furrow along his ribs. It was deep, but the heat of the plasma had cauterized it instantly. "It is not fatal," Noah gritted out, "just unpleasant." Kalia opened the medkit they had taken from the ship. She applied a regenerative gel to the wound. As her fingers touched his skin, the bond flared. This time, there were no walls, no doors to knock on. Noah felt her terror when he fell. He felt the absolute lethal protective instinct that had triggered her power. And Kalia felt his pain, sharp and stinging, but underneath it, she felt his awe. He was looking at her not as a princess to be saved, but as a force of nature. "You shouldn't have done that," Kalia whispered, her hands lingering on his chest after the bandage was applied. "You stepped in front of the gun. You idiot. You noble, stupid idiot." "It is the job," Noah said, his voice strained. "It is not your job to die for me," Kalia shouted, tears finally spilling over. "It is not your job to be a shield." "Then what is it?" Noah asked softly. Kalia looked at him. The air in the small room was heavy, charged with the ozone scent of her power and the metallic tang of his blood. She didn't answer with words. She leaned forward. This wasn't like the moment on the ship. This wasn't trauma seeking comfort. This was Kalia, the woman who had just blasted a bounty hunter through a wall, claiming what she wanted. She kissed him. It was slow, deliberate. Her lips were cool, but the contact set Noah's mind on fire. He tasted her relief, her fury, her love. It poured into him, filling the hollow spaces the war had left behind. Noah brought his hand up, cupping the back of her head, deepening the kiss. He poured everything back into her, his devotion, his promise, the absolute certainty that he would follow her into any fire. They pulled apart, breathless. Their foreheads rested against each other. The bond hummed. A perfect harmonious chord. There is no going back from this, Noah whispered. I know, Kalia said. She pulled back to look him in the eye. If we do this, if we are together, it changes everything. My mother will never accept it. The council will use it as proof of treason. It might destroy the chance for a diplomatic solution. Noah nodded. If we deny it, we save the politics. But we lie to ourselves, and a peace built on a lie won't last. Real love has consequences, Kalia said, tracing the line of his jaw. It isn't a fairy tale. It is a choice that costs something. So what do we choose? Noah asked. Kalia looked at the datapad containing the recording of the conspiracy. She looked at the bandage on Noah's side. She looked at the twin suns rising outside the cracks in the wall. We choose the truth, she said. We take this evidence back to Virlan. We walk into the lion's den, and we show them everything. The conspiracy, the weapons, and us, Kalia affirmed. We show them that a human and a Sarathi can be bound not by a spell, but by will. We show them that the future isn't war. It is this. Noah smiled. It was a dangerous smile, the smile of a soldier who finally had a mission he believed in. We are going to need a faster ship, he said. Kalia stood up, offering him her hand. Then let's go steal one, husband. The return to Virlan was not a homecoming. It was a ghost entering a graveyard. Noah and Kalia brought the stolen courier ship in on a dead vector, drifting silently through the orbital traffic lanes like a piece of debris until they were close enough to slip under the sensory net of the capital's northern district. They abandoned the vessel in a derelict dockyard, burying it under tarps and magnetic interference netting. The city was unrecognizable. Or rather, it was too recognizable, but twisted into a caricature of itself. The festival of the twin moons had begun. Every spire, every bridge, every curved surface of the organic city was draped in holographic light. Massive projections of constellations danced in the air, weaving stories of ancient Sarathi mythology. Music, a throbbing rhythmic pulse that vibrated in the teeth, echoed from the canyon walls of the megastructures. The streets were rivers of bodies, citizens pouring out to celebrate the celestial alignment, completely unaware that the ground beneath their feet was about to crack open. In the shadows of a loading bay, Noah adjusted the collar of his disguise. He wore the heavy hooded robe of a religious pilgrim, a common sight during the festival. Kalia stood beside him, similarly dressed, her face hidden behind a veil of shimmering mesh. We are connected, Kalia whispered. She wasn't speaking to him aloud. She was testing the encrypted frequency of the comms unit they had salvaged. I hear you, a voice crackled back. It was faint, distorted by layers of encryption. It was the captain of the Royal Guard, a man Kalia had trusted since she was a child. The first princess lives, but she is caged in her own council chamber. They have stripped her of the outer garrisons. She holds the inner sanctum by a thread. Can you get us inside? Kalia asked. Not directly, the captain replied. The security grid has been hard-locked by Lord Varshian, but the festival protocols have lowered the barriers on the civilian sectors to allow for the procession. If you can cross the Plaza of Reflection, there is a service node near the southern intake. I will leave the door unlatched for 10 seconds at the turn of the hour. 10 seconds, Noah murmured. Generous. It is the best I can do. Your Highness, the captain said, do not die. The link cut out. Noah looked at Kalia. Through the bond, he felt her fear. It was a cold, jagged thing in the back of his mind, but layered over it was a steel-hard resolve. She was terrified, but she was moving. "We have to cross the city," Noah said. "We have to walk right through the middle of the party." Kalia reached out and took his hand beneath the folds of her robe, her fingers interlaced with his, tight and desperate. "Then let us go to the festival." "Husband," she said. The Plaza of Reflection was a sea of light. Millions of Sarathi crowded the open space, their bioluminescence flaring in sync with the music. The air smelled of roasted spices and ozone. Noah and Kalia moved through the crush. They kept their heads down, mimicking the slow, reverent pace of pilgrims. But the bond was screaming. To the left, Noah projected, guiding her as he spotted a cluster of security drones scanning faces in the crowd. Kalia leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder as they walked, hiding her face from the scanners. To any observer, they were just a devout couple overcome by the emotion of the holy night. The contact was a necessity, a tactical decision to blend in. But as Noah's arm went around her waist to steer her through a knot of dancers, the tactical became personal. He could feel the warmth of her body through the rough fabric of the robes. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his ribs, synchronized with his own. In the middle of the most dangerous walk of his life, surrounded by enemies who would execute them on sight, Noah felt a sudden, piercing longing. He wanted to be here with her for real. He wanted to be a tourist, buying her spiced fruit from a vendor, watching the lights without looking for sniper nests. "Focus," Kalia's voice whispered in his mind. She had felt his distraction, his wish. "One day, Noah, one day we will come back and eat the fruit." He squeezed her waist in acknowledgement. They reached the southern intake. It was a massive ventilation tower disguised as a sculpture of a spiraling vine. The crowd here was thinner. The hour struck. A deep, resonant gong sounded from the palace, vibrating through the floor. "Now," Noah hissed. They slipped behind the sculpture. A small maintenance hatch hissed open. They dove inside, and the hatch sealed behind them with a magnetic thud. They were in the walls again. The rendezvous point was a sub-basement pump room, filled with the roar of hydraulic fluids moving through massive transparent pipes. Tech was waiting for them. The little engineer looked worse than when they had left him. His jumpsuit was stained with oil, and his scales were gray with stress. When he saw Kalia lower her hood, he nearly collapsed with relief. "You came back," Tech breathed. I thought you were dead. The newsfeed said the human ate your brain and piloted your body like a ship." Noah blinked. "That is a new one. Creative." Tech fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a jagged shard of crystal. It was a data spike, crude but functional. "I got it," Tech said, handing it to Kalia. "It was in the secondary archive, just like you said. It is all there. Your Highness, the shipping manifests, the weapon orders, and the comms logs between Varshian and the syndicate leaders." Kalia took the spike. Her hands were shaking. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the end of him." "There is more," Tech said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I saw the duty roster. Varshian has reassigned the internal security details, the guards in the council chamber. They are not royal guards. They are mercenaries wearing the crest. He is planning to kill her tonight," Noah realized. "He isn't waiting for a trial. He is going to stage a coup during the finale." "We have to hurry," Kalia said. "Tech, get to the lower levels. Hide until the shooting stops." Tech nodded frantically and scrambled away into the shadows. Noah and Kalia moved deeper into the palace. They knew the route now. They navigated the service corridors with the efficiency of wolves in their own territory. But as they neared the upper levels, a patrol of heavy assault drones blocked the main conduit. Noah grabbed Kalia and shoved her into a narrow storage alcove. pulling the door shut just as the drone's word passed. The alcove was tiny. It was designed to hold cleaning chemicals, not two full-grown adults. They were pressed together, chest to chest, legs tangled. The air was stale and smelled of astringent solvents. They froze, listening to the hum of the drones fading down the hallway. Noah looked down at Kalia. Her face was inches from his, in the dark. Her bioluminescence was the only light, casting a soft blue glow on his features. "You know," Kalia whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and suppressed hysteria. "For a romance that has shaken the foundations of the Empire, we spend a significant amount of time in closets, and vents, and sewage tunnels." Noah let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. "It is not exactly the grand ballrooms and starlight cruises you were promised, is it?" Kalia shook her head against his chest. "I expected more velvet, less grease." Noah shifted his weight, trying to give her an inch of space, but there was nowhere to go. He brought his hand up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over the glowing markings on her skin. "I promise you," he said, his voice dropping to a low, serious rumble. "If we get out of this, if we survive tonight, I am taking you on a real date." "A real date?" Kalia asked, her eyes searching his. "Yes, a table with a tablecloth. Food that doesn't come from a ration pack. Music that isn't an alarm siren. And absolutely no death threats for at least 3 hours." Kalia smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it lit up the dark alcove brighter than her skin. "I would like that," she whispered. "I would like that very much." The drones were gone. Noah pulled away, the moment breaking but the promise hanging in the air like a tether. "Let's go," he said. "We have a government to overthrow." They reached the observation deck of the inner sanctum 20 minutes later. They didn't enter the main chamber. Instead, Kalia led them to a hidden security nest, a relic of the old paranoid emperors, that looked down into the High Council room through a one-way energy screen. The scene below was chilling. The council chamber, usually a place of debate and decorum, had been turned into a cage. First Princess Lysara sat on her throne, but she was not ruling. She was surrounded. Lord Varshian stood at the foot of the dais, flanked by 4 other high counselors. A dozen soldiers in royal guard armor stood at the perimeter, but their posture was wrong, too aggressive, too loose. "Mercenaries, sign the order." "Lysara," Varshian said. His voice was amplified, echoing clearly into the observation nest. "I will not," Lysara said. Her voice was thin, raspy with exhaustion, but the steel was still there. "I will not condemn an entire species for the actions of one man, and I will not annul my daughter's rights based on your lies." "It is not a lie if the people believe it," Varshian shouted, slamming his hand on the arm of her throne. "Look at the screens. The people are terrified. They believe the human has bewitched Kalia. They believe Earth is preparing an invasion fleet. They are demanding action. They are demanding what you told them to demand," Lysara shot back. "If you do not sign the abdication and the declaration of war," Varshian hissed, leaning in close, "the people will storm this palace, and I will not be able to stop them. They will tear you apart, and when they find your daughter, they will tear her apart too." Lysara flinched. It was a microscopic movement, but Noah saw it. She was breaking. She could withstand threats to herself, but threats to Kalia were chipping away at her resolve. "He is going to break her," Noah said grimly. "We have to stop this," Kalia said. She turned to the control panel of the security nest. "We can't breach the room," Noah said, assessing the tactical situation below. 12 hostiles, heavy weapons, We have one pistol and a knife. We would be dead before we reached the dais. We don't need to reach the dais, Kalia said, her eyes blazing. We need to reach the people. She pointed to a heavy conduit cable running along the wall. That is the primary feed for the planetary broadcast grid. All the festival projections, the holographic constellations. They are being fed from the central nexus right below us. You want to hijack the signal? Noah asked. I want to crash the party, Kalia said. She grabbed the data spike Tech had given her. Can you slice the lock on the nexus port? Noah looked at the heavy Durasteel panel. I can hotwire a hover tank. I can open a door. He set to work on the panel, stripping wires and bypassing the biometric lock. It sparked and slid open. Kalia jammed the data spike into the port. The screens in the security nest flickered. The feed from the festival outside appeared, millions of people staring up at the sky. Kalia took a deep breath. She looked at Noah. I need you, she said. I can speak to them. But the data, the logic, I need you to sequence the evidence while I talk. I can't do both. Noah stepped up beside her. He placed his hand on her shoulder. The bond opened wide. I am here, he thought. I am your co-pilot. Let's fly, she answered. Kalia hit the override. Outside, in the Plaza of Reflection, the music stopped. It didn't fade out. It cut. A jarring silence fell over the crowd. The massive holographic constellations of heroes and mythical beasts flickered and vanished. A confused murmur rippled through the millions of observers. Then, a new image appeared. It was colossal, projected against the side of the palace and into the sky itself. It was Kalia. She was not wearing her armor or her royal finery. She was wearing a dirty, torn tunic. Her hair was messy. She looked exhausted, scared, and absolutely real. And standing right beside her, his hand on her shoulder, was the human, Noah Reyes. A gasp went up from the city. It was the sound of an entire civilization inhaling at once. People of Virlan. Kalia's voice boomed across the capital, amplified by every speaker in the city. Do not look away. In the council chamber below. Varshian froze. He looked up at the viewing screen, his face draining of color. Cut it! He screamed at his aides. Cut the feed! But the feed was locked from the inside. You have been told that I am a victim, Kalia said, her voice steadying. You have been told that I was stolen, that I was bewitched by a human sorcerer. That Earth is your enemy. On the massive projection. Noah stepped forward slightly. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a tired man protecting someone he loved. I am here to tell you the truth, Kalia continued. As she spoke, Noah worked through the bond. He accessed the data on the spike and fed it into the stream. Next to Kalia's giant image, windows of data began to open in the sky. This is the manifest of the Red Horizon, Kalia said, a Sarathi freighter. It was not carrying grain. It was carrying Class A disruptors. The image showed the weapons, the serial numbers. These weapons were sent to the extremists on Nyx Terrell. Kalia narrated, her voice gaining power. They were paid for by the High Council Treasury. Another window opened, a video log. It was Varshian's voice, clear and unmistakable. We need a catalyst, an accident. If the human were to kill the princess, the peace dies. The crowd in the plaza went silent. The shock was physical. This war you are being promised, Kalia said, tears shimmering in her eyes. It is a lie. It is a manufacture. A transaction to keep you afraid so that men like Lord Varshian can remain powerful. In the security nest. Noah squeezed her shoulder. Now, he projected. Tell them the rest. Kalia looked into the camera. She looked through the lens across the city and straight into the soul of her people. And as for this human, she said softly. She turned and looked at Noah. She took his hand. On the screen. The image was 50 stories tall, a Sarathi hand and a human hand, interlaced. I was not stolen. I was saved. And this bond, this terrified, accidental, beautiful thing, it is not a curse. It is a choice. She looked back at the camera. I choose him. Not because the stars commanded it, but because he is good, because he is brave, and because he listens. We choose each other. And if a human and a princess can choose peace, why can't you? The silence in the city held for one heartbeat. 2. Then, the roar began. It wasn't the roar of a mob. It was the roar of awakening in the council chamber. Varshian was screaming. He has corrupted the network. It is a deep fake. It is AI manipulation. But the other counselors were backing away from him. They had seen the bank transfers with their own names on them in the data dump. They knew the game was up. Lysara stood up. She looked at the screen, where her daughter was holding the human's hand. She looked at the data scrolling in the sky. The exhaustion fell away from her face, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. "Guards!" Lysara shouted, her voice cracked with command authority. "Arrest the traitor Varshian!" The mercenaries hesitated. They looked at Varshian, then at the queen, then at the angry notifications flashing on their own wrist comps from the city outside. Varshian saw the hesitation. He saw the walls closing in. His face twisted into a snarl of pure xenophobic hatred. "She has been corrupted by alien seduction," he shrieked, saliva flying from his mouth. "She is a whore for the human filth. If I cannot save this empire from itself, I will burn it to the ground." He pulled a device from his robes and slammed his thumb down on the trigger. It was not a bomb. It was a command signal. The palace shook. From the walls of the council chamber, hidden panels exploded outward. Security constructs, massive spider-like combat droids that Varshian had smuggled into the palace defenses, dropped from the ceiling. "Kill them all!" Varshian screamed. "Kill the queen! Kill the council! Leave no witnesses!" The droids opened fire. The mercenaries, realizing they were now targets too, opened fire back. The chamber dissolved into chaos. Plasma bolts tore through the air. The crystal throne shattered. Lysara threw up her bioelectric shield, but a droid slammed into it, hammering her back. In the security nest, Noah and Kalia watched the room below turn into a slaughterhouse. "Mother!" Kalia screamed. "She is pinned!" Noah yelled. "The droids are flanking her." He grabbed the vibro blade he had kept from the tunnels. Kalia grabbed a heavy wrench from the maintenance rack. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The bond was a siren wailing in their heads. "Save her." They kicked open the door of the security nest and sprinted into the corridor. The palace was convulsing around them. Varshian's signal had triggered insurgent cells throughout the building. Explosions rocked the walls. Dust choked the air, and they ran. They ran through collapsing hallways, dodging falling debris. They vaulted over the bodies of loyalist guards and extremist attackers alike. They reached the upper balcony of the council chamber just as the main doors below were blown off their hinges. The scene was a nightmare. Smoke filled the room. Bodies littered the floor. In the center of the carnage, Lysara was on her knees. Her shield was flickering. Dying. 3 spider droids were circling her, their red optic sensors glowing in the smoke. And on the far side of the room, hovering near the shattered ceiling, a sleek, black shape unfolded, a sniper drone. It wasn't targeting the droids. It wasn't targeting the soldiers. It was locking onto Lysara's head. Noah saw it. His soldier's eye picked out the glint of the lens in the chaos. "Drone! High right!" Noah roared. Kalia felt the spike of terror from her mother through the familial link, not the bond with Noah, but the blood connection of mother and daughter. It was a scream of finality. They were too far away. They were on the balcony, 50 feet above the floor. The stairs were gone. "Jump!" Noah yelled. He didn't wait for an answer. He grabbed Kalia's hand and leaped over the railing into the smoke and the fire, plummeting toward the killing floor. The fall from the balcony was a blur of smoke and adrenaline. For 3 seconds. Noah Reyes was not a diplomat or a fugitive. He was a falling object with a single burning objective. He hit the floor of the council chamber with a bone-jarring impact, tucking his shoulder into a roll that dispersed the momentum but still knocked the wind out of his lungs. Beside him, Kalia landed in a crouch, her palms slapping the stone, kinetic energy rippling off her armor like shockwaves. Noah scrambled up, his hands searching the debris-strewn floor. His fingers closed around the grip of a discarded Sarathi pulse rifle. It was heavy, designed for hands with longer fingers, but he didn't care. He swung the weapon up. Across the smoke-choked chamber, the sniper drone hovered. It was a sleek, malevolent sliver of black metal, its single red optic fixed on the kneeling form of First Princess Lysara. Her shield had shattered. She was looking up at the machine with the calm, terrifying acceptance of a queen who knew her reign was over. Noah didn't think. He didn't aim with his eyes. He aimed with the bond. He felt the exact location of the threat through a triangulation of his own combat instincts and Kalia's desperate, screaming fear. He pulled the trigger. A lance of blue energy shrieked across the room. It struck the drone amidships just as the machine's firing cycle began. The drone detonated. Metal shrapnel rained down around Lysara, clattering harmlessly against her robes. Noah stood panting, the rifle smoking in his hands. "Mother!" Kalia screamed, sprinting across the floor. She threw herself at Lysara, wrapping her arms around the First Princess, checking frantically for wounds. Lysara looked dazed. She touched Kalia's face, her fingers leaving streaks of soot on the princess's skin. You came back. We chose the truth." Kalia sobbed, burying her face in her mother's neck. Noah scanned the room. The mercenaries were retreating or dead. The spider droids lay in sparking heaps, but one figure was missing. "He is gone," Noah shouted. "Varshian is gone." He pointed to a section of the wall behind the dais. A hidden panel had slid open, revealing a dark, cylindrical transit shaft. Kalia pulled away from her mother. Her eyes were hard, the gold irises burning with a cold fire. "Stay with the guards," she told Lysara. "Secure the chamber." "Where are you going?" Lysara asked, grabbing her wrist. "To finish this," Kalia said. She looked at Noah. He nodded. They turned and ran toward the open shaft. The chase led them into the arteries of the palace, deep into the bioorganic machinery that kept the capital alive. Varshian had triggered a lockdown protocol. Blast doors slammed shut behind them as they ran, forcing them deeper into the restricted sectors. They burst into the Royal Arboretum. It was a zero-gravity environment, a massive sphere of air where rare, bioluminescent flora floated without soil. Trees with roots like jellyfish drifted in the center, their leaves glowing with a soft, rhythmic pulse. There was no up or down here. Noah pushed off the bulkhead, launching himself into the void. He floated past a drifting globule of water the size of a car. "There!" Kalia shouted. Varshian was propelling himself toward the far airlock, using a handheld thruster. He saw them and spun around, firing a wild burst from a sidearm. Plasma bolts sizzled through the leaves, vaporizing the delicate vegetation. Noah grabbed a floating branch to arrest his momentum. Returning fire, his shots went wide, sizzling against the far wall. "You cannot stop what is coming!" Varshian's voice echoed in the chamber, amplified by the spherical acoustics. "The fleet is already mobilizing. The Earth sector will burn." He scrambled through the airlock and slammed it shut. Noah and Kalia kicked off the walls, diving through the closing iris of the door just before it sealed. They tumbled into a gravity-inverted transit shaft. The orientation flipped instantly. The ceiling became the floor. Noah slammed onto his knees, his stomach lurching violently. Kalia landed beside him with cat-like grace, though her face went pale. "He is heading for the quantum core." Kalia gasped. "If he destabilizes the containment field, he takes the whole city with him." Noah finished. They sprinted down the ceiling, their boots clanging on the metal grating. Below them, or above them, the shaft stretched down into infinite darkness. They reached the core chamber. It was a room where reality felt thin. In the center, suspended in a magnetic cradle, was the quantum core, a singularity no larger than a fist. Spinning so fast it sang a high, piercing note that vibrated in the marrow of Noah's bones. The air around it warped and rippled like heat haze. Varshian stood on the gantry overlooking the core. He was cornered. Behind him was the lethal radiation of the singularity. In front of him were the two people he hated most in the universe. He looked ragged. His robes were torn, his eyes wild with the desperation of a fanatic who realizes his god is dead. "Stop!" Noah shouted, leveling the rifle. Varshian laughed. It was a wet, broken sound. "Look at you, the human savage and his pet princess. Do you think this ends with my death?" "It ends with the truth," Kalia said, stepping forward. Her hands were empty, her palms glowing faintly. "The truth?" Varshian sneered. "The truth is that you are an abomination. Kalia, you have polluted the bloodline. Even if I die, the scandal of your union will tear the empire apart. Half the council will rise against your mother. Civil war is inevitable." He looked at Noah, his lip curling. "Go on, human. Shoot me. Prove me right. Show the galaxy that you are nothing but a killer. Spill Sarathi blood in the sacred chamber. It will be the recruiting poster for the next 1,000 years of war." Noah's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to fire. This was the man who had tried to kill Kalia. This was the architect of the war. It would be justice. But Noah looked at the singularity spinning behind Varshian. He looked at Kalia, who was watching him, holding her breath. He felt her anxiety through the bond, but also her trust. She wasn't stopping him. She was letting him choose. Noah lowered the rifle. "No," Noah said. Varshian blinked, confused. "You are weak. I am not weak," Noah said. "I am tired. I am tired of men like you who think death is the only solution." He reached up and tapped the comms unit on his collar. "Are we still live?" Noah asked. In the security nest, miles above, Tech the engineer was frantically working the controls. "Yes!" Tech's voice crackled in Noah's ear. "The signal is boosted. The whole planet is watching." Noah looked at Varshian. "They heard you," Noah said calmly. "They heard you admit to the conspiracy. They heard you call for civil war. They saw you try to destroy the city." Varshian's eyes widened. He looked around, as if searching for the invisible eyes of the audience. "You," he stammered, "you wanted a martyr." Noah said, "I am not giving you one. I am giving them a criminal." With a scream of pure, incoherent rage, Varshian drew a vibro blade from his sleeve and lunged. He didn't aim for Noah. He aimed for Kalia. Noah didn't move. He didn't have to. Kalia stepped forward, She didn't raise a shield. She didn't fire a bolt of lightning. She moved with the fluidity of water. She caught Varshin's wrist mid-swing, using his own momentum to spin him around. She placed her other hand flat against the base of his neck. "Sleep," she whispered. She released a precise, controlled pulse of bioelectricity. It wasn't a lethal strike. It was a surgical shutdown of the nervous system. Varshian stiffened, his eyes rolling back in his head. The blade clattered to the floor. He collapsed into a heap at her feet. Kalia stood over him, breathing hard. She looked at her hands, then at Noah. "I could have killed him," she said softly. The bond hummed with the residue of her anger. But it was fading, replaced by a profound exhaustion, deep relief. "I wanted to, but you didn't," Noah said, walking over to her. He holstered the rifle. "That is the difference." He reached out and took her hand. "Let's go home." Kalia. The days that followed were a blur of political triage. The Empire was in shock. The footage of the confrontation in the core chamber played on a loop in every city square. The evidence of the weapons shipments to Nixterel was undeniable. The conspiracy unraveled with terrifying speed. Counselors who had allied with Varshian scrambled to distance themselves, resigning in disgrace or facing arrest by loyalist forces. But the silence in the palace was heavier than the noise outside. Noah and Kalia were kept apart, not by guards, but by protocol. The healers needed to examine Kalia. The legal scribes needed to debrief Noah. They were separated by walls of bureaucracy, though the bond remained a constant, low-frequency hum connecting them, a lifeline in the dark. 3 days after the attack, Noah was summoned to the first princess's private solar. The room was quiet, lit by the twin suns setting over the city. Lysara stood by the window, looking out. She wore no armor, only simple robes of mourning white. Kalia was there too. She sat on a low divan, her hands clasped in her lap. When Noah entered, she looked up, and the relief in her eyes hit him like a physical embrace. "Lieutenant Reyes," Lysara said, turning around. Her face was unreadable. "Your Highness," Noah said, bowing his head. Lysara walked over to him. She studied him, her golden eyes tracing the lines of fatigue on his face, the gray in his hair. "You saved my life," she said. "You saved my city. You saved my daughter. I did what was necessary," Noah said. Lysara sighed. "And yet, the law remains. You are human. She is Sarathi. The bond you share, it violates 10,000 years of tradition. Half my council is demanding I annul it. They say it is an infection. They say it weakens the bloodline." Noah looked at Kalia. She was watching her mother, her body tense. "I understand," Noah said quietly. "Do you?" Lysara asked sharply. "Do you understand that if I legitimize this, I am rewriting the foundation of our society? I am inviting chaos." "I understand that you are afraid," Noah said. Lysara stiffened. "You are afraid that if you change, you will lose control," Noah continued, his voice steady. "But if you don't change, you will lose her." He gestured to Kalia. "I love your daughter," Noah said. The words hung in the air, simple and absolute. I didn't plan to. I fought it. But I love her, not because of the bond. I love her because she is the bravest person I have ever met. Kalia let out a small, choked sound. "But," Noah went on, turning to look Lysara in the eye, "I will not be the reason her life is destroyed. If my presence here endangers her, if it endangers your people, I will leave." Kalia stood up. "No! I will go back to Earth," Noah said, his voice cracking slightly. "I will sever the connection as much as I can." I will live with the ghost of her in my head for the rest of my life, if that is what keeps her safe. Noah! Kalia crossed the room. She grabbed his lapels, shaking him. Do not you dare choose for me. She turned to her mother. He is willing to break his own heart to save yours. Mother, Kalia said, tears streaming down her face. Do not you see? That is what the bond is. It is not a spell. It is not a weapon. It is just love. She took a breath. Standing tall, I love him, and I am done letting the stars decide my fate. If you annul this bond, you annul me. I will abdicate. I will walk out of this palace and I will never come back. Lysara looked from Noah to Kalia. She saw the soldier who was willing to walk away to save the woman he loved. She saw the daughter who was willing to give up a crown to keep the man she chose. She looked at the ancient scrolls on her desk, the laws written by dead emperors in a time of fear. Lysara closed her eyes. She thought of the sniper drone. She thought of the way Kalia had looked on the broadcast, holding Noah's hand. She thought of the silence in the quantum core when Noah refused to shoot. The universe changes, Lysara whispered. She opened her eyes. They were bright with tears. We survive because we adapt. She walked over to them. She took Noah's hand and Kalia's hand, and she pressed them together. There is no precedent for this, Lysara said, a faint smile touching her lips. So we will make one. The great hall was packed, not with terrified refugees this time, but with citizens, diplomats, and the entire surviving council. Lysara stood on the repaired dais. Kalia and Noah stood beside her, citizens of Virlan. Lysara spoke, her voice amplified to the heavens. We have lived in fear of the other. We have built walls of crystal and laws of iron to keep us separate. But walls do not protect us from the truth. She gestured to Noah and Kalia. This man and this woman have shown us a different way. They have shown us that honor is not a species trait, that loyalty is not genetic, that love, real love, is a force stronger than any weapon we possess. She raised her hands. Therefore, by the power of the first throne, I declare the ancient laws of separation null and void. I recognize the union of Princess Kalia and Lieutenant Noah Reyes. A gasp rippled through the hall. They are not merely married, Lysara declared. They are bridge bonded. They are the first span across the void between our worlds. Let their union be the charter for a new alliance, an alliance of equals, an alliance of choice. The silence held for a moment. Then, the Earth ambassador began to clap. Then the loyalist guards. Then the citizens. The sound grew into a roar, a thunderous wave of approval that shook the crystalline pillars. Noah looked at Kalia. She was crying, but she was smiling. Bridge bonded? Noah shouted over the noise. Is that a real term? It is now, Kalia shouted back. She grabbed him by the collar of his dress uniform and pulled him down. She kissed him. It wasn't a tentative kiss or a terrified kiss. It was a kiss of victory. And for the first time, the entire empire cheered. Later that night, the noise of the celebration faded. Noah and Kalia found themselves in the private garden of the royal sector. It was a quiet place, filled with silver moss and night-blooming flowers that smelled of vanilla and rain. The twin moons hung heavy in the sky, casting long, double shadows. They sat on a stone bench, shoulder to shoulder. The frantic energy of the last few weeks, the adrenaline, the terror, the constant noise had finally drained away, leaving a peaceful, heavy silence. So, Noah said softly, "We are legal. We are legal." Kalia agreed. She rested her head on his shoulder. "And we are alive." Noah turned his head to kiss her hair. The bond was open between them. There were no doors tonight. He could feel her contentment, a warm, golden light that filled the spaces in his mind where the war used to live. He reached out and took her hand. He didn't just hold it, he explored it. He traced the lines of her palm, the sharp tips of her fingers, the pulsing bioluminescence of her wrist. "Do you remember what you said?" Noah asked. "On the ship?" Kalia looked up. "I said a lot of things on the ship, mostly complaints about the plumbing." Noah smiled. "You said we would know, that when we crossed the line, it would be because we were safe, because we chose it." Kalia's expression softened. Her eyes searched his face. "I remember." She turned on the bench to face him. She reached up and unbuttoned the high collar of his tunic. Her fingers were cool against his skin, but the sensation sent a wave of heat through the bond that made them both catch their breath. "We are safe, Noah," she whispered, "and I choose you." She leaned in and kissed him. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling back. They fell into each other. The physical sensation was overwhelming, the touch of skin, the taste of mouths. But the bond made it something more. It was emerging as they embraced. Noah felt her love not just as an emotion, but as a physical texture. He felt the jagged edges of his own trauma being smoothed over by her light. He felt her lonely, cold places being warmed by his fire. They lay back on the soft moss, the twin moons watching from above. There were no words left to say. There was only the hum of the bond, singing a new song of trust, of consent, and of a peace that had finally truly arrived. Epilogue 5 years later. The reception hall of the Earth Embassy on Virlan was a chaotic, joyous mix of species. Human diplomats in suits clinked glasses with Sarathi merchants in flowing silk. Children of both species ran between the legs of the adults, playing a game that involved a holographic ball and a lot of shouting. First, Princess Lysara stood near the buffet table, holding a glass of nectar. She looked older, her movements slower, but her eyes sparkled with a contentment that had been missing for decades. Beside her stood her granddaughter, Ilara. The child was small, with pale blue skin and messy dark hair, a visual testament to her heritage. She was tugging on the sleeve of a tall, bewildered human delegate. "Husband," the child chirped, holding up a half-eaten sweet cake. The room froze. The human delegate, a young man from the Mars colony, looked terrified. He looked at the child, then at Lysara, waiting for the diplomatic incident that would end his career. Lysara stared at the scene. The memory of a shattered banquet hall and a screaming princess echoed in her mind. Then, she threw her head back and laughed. It was a rich, warm sound. She walked over, gently detaching the child from the delegate's sleeve. "No, Ilara," Lysara said, wiping frosting from the girl's cheek. "We do not call strangers husband anymore. It causes entirely too much paperwork." She glanced across the room. Noah and Kalia stood on the balcony. They looked older, too. Noah had a few more gray hairs. Kalia wore the robes of a high counselor. But they were standing close, their hands brushing, heads inclined toward each other as they shared a private joke. Lysara smiled. She looked back at the terrified delegate. "Relax, Lieutenant," she said. "It is just a story she likes to hear." On the balcony, the wind was cool. Noah leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. It had changed. The crystalline spires were still there, but now they were interspersed with human architecture, steel bridges, glass domes, docking rings for Earth freighters. The sky was filled with ships from a dozen worlds. "It is loud," Noah commented. "It is vibrant," Kalia corrected. She leaned against him, wrapping her arm through his. She looked at the city, then at him. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked. "The accident." "Every day," Noah admitted. "I think about the odds. One explosion, one moment of panic, one forehead touch. It should have been a disaster," Kalia said. "It should have been a war." Noah turned to face her. He ran his hand down her arm, feeling the familiar steady hum of the bond in his mind. It was no longer a loud noise. It was the background radiation of his life, the constant North Star. "It wasn't the ritual, Kalia," he said softly. "The ritual just opened the door." Kalia nodded. "I know." The miracle wasn't the magic. The miracle, Noah said, was what came after. The running, the fighting, the instant noodles, the choice to listen when everyone else was screaming. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "We built this," he said, gesturing to the piece below. "We didn't inherit it. We built it." Kalia squeezed his hand. "And we are still building it." She looked at the horizon, where the twin suns were beginning to rise, painting the sky in gold and violet. The future was still uncertain. There were still factions who hated them, still challenges to face, but they were no longer facing them alone. "Ready?" Noah asked. "Always." Kalia replied. They stepped forward, hand in hand, walking back into the light of the room. Their bond a living, breathing testament that in a universe of chaos, love was the only rebellion that mattered.